taking today. So as you can see, I'm recording the meeting. So everyone, thanks for joining us. Before we get started, I want to let you know that as you just heard, we will be recording the session today. It will be available on the responsibility.org YouTube channel later today or early tomorrow. And we'll also send out a link to this recording in our follow-up email that will hopefully allow you to share it with anyone not available today. Everyone is on mute at this time. If you do have a question, however, go ahead and put it into either the Q&A box or into the chat, and we'll address those as they come in with the panelists. So let's get started. My name is Erin Hildreth. I lead the communications department at responsibility.org. The mission of responsibility.org is threefold. We work to eliminate underage drinking. We also work to eliminate drunk driving and work with others to eliminate all forms of impaired driving. And we work to empower adults of legal drinking age who choose to drink to do so responsibly. Since 1991, we've made great progress on all of these three missions. We've not done it alone because we all have a seat at the table of responsibility, and responsibility starts with each one of us. Responsibility.org is all about conversations that lead to a lifetime of informed alcohol choices, but not every conversation is about alcohol. Summer brings more people on the road for both long trips and short trips, depending on their travels. So when we come together and put tools into action, whether it's planning a safe ride home, talking to our kids, which of course we'll talk about today, or making informed choices ourselves, we take the steps to ensure that we all get there responsibly. That's what our summer campaign is all about. So when it comes to driving, and this is for all of us, not just for new drivers, there are so many rules and responsibilities, but they are learned over time and modeled by those around us. And so that's what our session is about today. Allow me to, I'm going to introduce our speakers here. I'll have you all introduce yourselves since you will represent yourselves better than I could ever do it. And we'll start going in alphabetical order. I'll start with you, Rick.
Thanks, Erin. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone, depending on where you are in the globe. A pleasure to be with you all today. Rick Bird, I'm the director of the DC Highway Safety Office. As such, I lead the mayor's operations here in DC around a variety of mobility safety options. I've been in the safety field for over a decade, previously working in the youth health and safety space. Really looking forward to our conversation.
Perfect. Patrick?
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. I'm Pat Burke. I'm currently Executive Director of the DC Police Foundation, retired from DC Police as an Assistant Chief and a former U.S. Marshal for Washington, D.C. A lot of my career was spent in traffic safety at different levels throughout the department, and something I'm still very involved in with whether it's photo enforcement, working with Rick and highway safety, Washington Regional Alcohol Program, and so many groups that are still trying to make an impact and keep our youth and everyone safe.
Agreed. Kristen?
Hi, I'm Kristen Petway. I'm Executive Director of Drive Smart Virginia. We are a traffic safety nonprofit. We service the state of Virginia and have recently moved also into the state of Maryland. And I've been with the organization for about 16 years now.
Perfect. And last but not least, of course, Kimberly.
Hi, everybody. I'm Kimberly Schwind. I'm the Assistant Director and Training Programs Administrator for the Ohio Traffic Safety Office. I've been here about 3.5 years, but I have a background in traffic safety that goes back to about 2010. I worked at AAA, oversaw our driver training enterprise there, and also, worked on teen driving issues, child passenger safety, older driver issues. Here in my current role, I oversee Ohio's driver training and Motorcycle Ohio.
Thank you. Okay, so allow me to set the stage by sharing the state of teen driving in our country. I'd like to, of course, thank my colleagues, Katie and Maureen, for helping me pull this information together, some of it brand new as of last week. I know that many of you all may be familiar with some of these numbers, but I'm going to repeat them anyway, just to remind us that they are not just numbers, they're people. In many cases, there are kids, there are friends, or there are other young people within our community. So 2,611 people were killed in crashes involving a teen driver in 2023, including 822 who were the teen driver. Of the 2,656 passenger vehicle occupants, 15 to 20, involved in traffic crashes in 2022, 48% were unrestrained. Wear your seatbelts, right? Among persons under 21, drunk driving fatalities have declined 52% since 1991, which is great. However, over the past decade, there's been an almost 31% increase in the number of persons under 21 killed in drunk driving crashes. So we have some work cut out for us to get those numbers back down. And in 2022, 47% of young drivers, again 15 to 20, involved in fatal crashes had alcohol in their systems, were unrestrained, and 67% of the youth drivers who were killed during drinking, who were killed were drinking at the time of the crash. So that being said, we have some work to do. So let's talk about it. When you see these statistics and trends, what's your reaction? And how does this resonate with what you're seeing in DC, Pat?
I think the one statistic that really jumps off that sheet for me is how many young people are unrestrained. And I think this, applies to everybody on the call. How do we build that habit in? My kids have never gone without a seatbelt from the first day they were in a car. We have to make sure that it's just a natural thing to do where people would be uncomfortable not buckling up in a car. And when you look at the usage rates for adults nationally, I think those have generally been pretty high. But once again, a lot of work we need to do to make sure that we keep pushing that message that you have to wear your seatbelt every single time you're in the car, no matter where you're seated in the car. And then obviously it's nice to see, on the positive note, a sober, curious movement. And the good news is, that we have young people who aren't drinking, but there's still a lot of peer pressure out there. And when you think that, especially when any amount of alcohol in your system can allow you to be arrested for DUI in many jurisdictions throughout the United States, still too many people not only drinking underage, but then not either getting into the car with an impaired driver or driving impaired themselves. So those are troubling statistics. And as you said, a lot of work remains to be done. And beyond law enforcement, it really comes to good parenting and consistent messaging.
Agreed. Yep. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Kimberly, because when we spoke, you said something that really struck a chord with me, something I'd never thought about as a parent myself. And that is about how parents should approach teaching their teens how to drive. And so what are some things that parents should do, or how should they approach it?
Yeah, as parents, I think we're always in a hurry to get our kids to the next stage. And it starts as soon as, they're in the car seat. You want to flip them around forward facing, and then you want to get them in the booster seat. And then when can they get out of the booster seat? And then when it's time to drive, it's when can they drive so that I don't have to drive them to practice anymore, right? So that they can be self-sufficient and on their own. And I think at every stage, what we're doing is removing a layer of safety and kind of putting them more at risk. And so one thing that, we think about is how many parents out there spend so much time, energy, money in sports, right? Sports or activities. I'm a parent of two boys and they're in travel sports, and I know the commitment that we have put into these sports. And so when we look at driving, we have to look at driving as learning to master any skill. It takes a lot of time and practice, right? So I've heard that it takes about 10,000 hours to be an expert at something. And so that doesn't just go for soccer, that also goes for driving, right? Driving is a complicated skill. And so we need to really understand that we need to spend that time with our kids practicing the driving. That experience is critical, just like you would invest that time and energy in any sport. It's not something that you can rush and expect them to just get out on the roads and be experts. And so in Ohio, recently, Governor Mike DeWine announced a media campaign that really draws that parallel between the amount of time that teens spend learning to drive and the amount of time that we spend devoted to practicing extracurricular activities like soccer or ballet. And so, this all part of the game campaign, we've put together resources on teacherteentodrive.ohio.gov, which I believe everybody will have access to. And it walks people through the process and explains that you really do need to spend that time practicing with your teen, and gives you the tools that you need to do that, to walk through that graduated driver licensing system and take that time to make sure that your teen's ready to go.
Perfect. Thank you. I love that tie-in. I'm a mom too. My kids, everyone who is a parent, their kids have so much going on. And so really thinking about it in that way, that really, it struck me. So I'm so thankful to you for sharing that. So I'll go down the line. I'll start with you, Rick. What are the top risks for teens when they get behind the wheel, when they get on the road?
Yeah, I think Kimberly said it well, inexperience. I'm mindful of the fact that, as Kimberly was alluding to, in the District of Columbia, we require people to take about 1,000 hours before they become a barber, or to be involved in many professions. But yet here in DC, we don't have a requirement for driver's education. And so it's so important that parents and other caring adults in the lives of our young people invest in both the art and the science of driving, working on those skills that we know will serve them well, working on putting them in diverse situations. Certainly in DC, we have a very urban element, but then transitioning to our rural roadways and finding ways to think about how we put teens in different situations, whether that's merging onto an interstate or making that obscure turn around Logan Circle or DuPont Circle, whatever those roundabouts are for our New Englanders, rotaries. Might be. All of those elements are so important. So practice, practice, practice. And as we're thinking about summer, if you're going on that summer road trip, what a great time to have your novice driver be the driver and to provide that coaching, not just in that moment. My last tidbit is for parents not just to think about coaching their teen before they let them off on that first solo drive, but to keep doing check-ins, right? We wouldn't just do one training session with any other skill and then let them go. After 2 weeks, after 2 months, after 2 years, still be giving that feedback, because it is indeed both an art and a science to be that safe driver we need them to be.
Absolutely. Kristen, how about you? The top risk for teens when they get behind the wheel?
Yeah, so already mentioned inexperience, buckling up was already mentioned as well. I think just risk taking is an issue with teens. So any risk that you can think of behind the wheel, they're probably more apt to doing. Speeding, aggressive driving, distracted driving has been shown in studies to be a major factor. And when you think about distraction, you typically think of phones, but it's been shown that peers are actually a top distraction for teen drivers. So a lot of states have laws about how many young passengers are allowed in a vehicle with a teen driver. There's a reason for that. And you, as a parent, you really should make sure they're sticking to that. Every additional teen that's added to the vehicle is an exponential risk that's added to that driver. So let's make sure that our teens are driving within the laws, but also just trying to minimize how many of their friends are driving with them. Drowsy driving is an issue with teens. They're up late studying or, out at practice and trying to catch up with homework or whatnot. And then before you know it, they haven't had their proper amount of sleep. And so we want to make sure that's addressed as well. And then, of course, you had mentioned in the stats that, we do see some substance use with teens, even though they're not legal yet to drink or to, imbibe in some of the drugs. So just making sure that, that we're having those conversations, that there's some sort of plan for if that does happen, how are they going to get home safely? Those kinds of conversations are really important.
Perfect. And we'll get to that for sure during this conversation. Kimberly, do you have anything to add to the list?
Yeah, so here in Ohio, we take a look every month at the at-fault teen fatal crashes. And one thing that really stood out to us is speed. It was, when we look at the contributing circumstances for why did these teens crash, right? What's behind these at fault teen fatal crashes? Speed topped the list, 34%. And so we kind of wanted to know why, what's causing these teens to speed. And so we started doing a survey in our juvenile driver improvement program courses, which basically is a course that if you've had a traffic citation, then you go through this course. And so asking these students that, had citations for some reason, what about speed? Why are you speeding? And so some of the things that teens were saying, or there's they don't really think that going 5 to 10 miles over the speed limit is an issue. They feel like they need to go with the flow of traffic. Someone's tailgating them. They're not comfortable with that. So they feel like they have to speed up. They're trying to get to their destination faster. They feel like it's not a big deal if nobody else is in the car with them, or they're running late. And so, all very common reasons for why we speed, but we know that speed combined with that inexperience and often that tendency to take risks can lead to deadly consequences. So speed is definitely a big risk for teen drivers.
Thank you. So what are some of the best ways for parents to monitor their kids or to set some rules? Patrick, I'm going to ask you that one.
I think it's, first of all, being clear in your communications with the kids. And uh, all four of my children are now in their 20s. So I kind of survived the teen years. You can see the gray hair that's come with it. But I think a lot of it is, first of all, we all need to realize we're humans. We all, make mistakes with different things, and we're all learning, and that's why I'm glad to see so many people on with us today, because hopefully we can learn from each other, and that people have been through it as well. And one of the things I wanted to throw in too, we really have to, as parents, model good behavior. As a cop for almost 30 years, I wasn't always the best driver when it comes to speed and some different things too. And I'd have to step outside myself and saying, hey, these are kids in the back of the car watching me. Driving too fast or doing things. Although it was even in a police car, I shouldn't be driving like that. I have to model good behavior and do good with that. And then really, instead of just lecturing the kids, especially when it comes time for driving and when you're having conversations, especially about alcohol and underage drinking, is listening and, kind of trying to find out, what's going on. Is there peer pressure? What the current challenges are? And rather than, I kind of find myself once again as a cop with a tendency to lecture and listen to the kids and, kind of hear their strategies if they're at an event and somebody's drinking or what they would do in different situations. So I think those were the things that came into play. Obviously, when you look at some of the technologies available, even with insurance companies, they can monitor speed. You can pay for safe driving, basically audits of your children and cars and different things. So there's different ways to do it, but I really think it's important to have those conversations, set your rules with your kids about, what you expect, make sure they're wearing their seatbelts. They know it's absolutely not acceptable to drink with or have any amount of alcohol in your system or to drink underage, especially if they're getting behind the wheel of an automobile. And really reinforcing that, hey, if one of your friends has been drinking and they choose the one who drank the least to drive, don't get in that car. There's too many options right now, and everything is make good choices, make good choices, make good choices, but let them talk about those choices and the different challenges they face. So I think it's really setting those standards and then listening to your kids.
Yep. And Kristen, I'll turn to you really quickly just because I know that as part of our recap email, we'll make sure we send out a list of resources, but maybe you could share a little bit about some resources available to parents.
Yeah, so when it comes to parents, I'm parents of young kids, so I'm not here yet, but I know when my teens become drivers, I'll be stalking them to the point where it's going to be annoying and I won't care. And I encourage everyone else to do the same because as we've talked about, parents are a huge role model for driving behaviors, and to continue to coach and talk to them about it even after they've been driving for even if it's been a few years, they still need that that touch point with you. So you can download apps and we'll send out a list of ones that I've heard of that people use. And essentially you track their speed, you track where they are location wise. You can check if they picked up their phone, if they're sending texts, if they're checking their TikTok. You can check if they're hard braking, which means that they're following too closely. You can check all those kinds of things. And not only should you check them, but there should be some sort of contract in place with them. So if they break any of those rules that you set for them, there are consequences. You stick to those consequences, you're strict about it. And you take it seriously, because if you take driving seriously, they will take their driving seriously. So take a look at those apps. There's also, I put out in the resources afterward, a link to the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety has some great resources. And since they're national, it's not state to state, which is nice. They do have a GDL tracker, which will help you if you are in a specific state to know what the graduated driver licensing laws are in that state. And it has a driving skills checklist. So if you're teaching your teen how to drive, it gives you some things that you should definitely be doing that could be above and beyond what your state recommends. And then there is like a specific teen driving budget. A teen driving contract in there. And then there's also a list of safety vehicles, or vehicles that have safety features for teens for every budget. There's a list, and I recommend that too, because I know a lot of us, it's so easy to just hand me down, right? Hand me down the car. But remember that the newer cars have nicer safety features, and who would benefit most from those safety features are teen drivers. So just double checking about, what the best options are as far as what vehicle you're picking for your teen to drive.
Perfect. That's great advice. I know taking my kiddo out on the road practicing, I asked him to park, and when he did a pretty bad job, but I was able to turn on the camera and it showed him exactly where he was in the parking spot, which helped him with that. So I love that idea. So Kimberly, I'm going to turn to you just to ask you which kids, young adults really, are the highest risk on the roads, and what should be done about this group?
Yeah, and that's a tough one, right? So I mentioned that we look at the at fault teen fatal crashes every single month. And what has really stood out are the 18, 19-year-old males. So last year in Ohio, 18 and 19-year-old drivers caused more fatal crashes than the 16 and 17-year-old. And 81% of those at fault in these fatal crashes were male. And so I'm pretty sure that Ohio is not much different than other states. This is a very high risk group, and a lot of it is, that the choices that they're making. Kristen, you talked about choices, and yeah, it is, the choices that they're making are often higher risk. This really is also in line with research from the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia that showed a few years ago that Ohio drivers that were licensed at 16 and 17 were less likely to be in injury crashes in their first 12 months of licensure than those 18 and 19-year-old drivers. And so, you ask what to do about it. And that's something that it's a difficult group to reach, right? Like I know my 12-year-old boy was fighting me last week on wearing a bicycle helmet, right? So it's kind of when they have that in their head that, nothing's going to happen. He said, "Why do I need to wear a helmet?" Well, because you have to protect your head. And he said, "Well, that's only if I crash," right? Like they don't think they're going to crash. So they don't really listen to the advice. But what we do know, going back to that inexperience, is the number one reason why we're seeing these crashes is, we know that those 16 and 17-year-old drivers here in Ohio were required to take driver education. 18 and 19-year-old drivers in Ohio have not been required to take driver education. So we believe that there is a correlation there. And, the research has definitely shown that drivers who have behind the wheel training with an approved instructor were involved in fewer serious injury and fatal crashes, had fewer convictions of after licensure than those that didn't receive this training. In Ohio, Governor Mike DeWine is prioritizing safety for this high risk group. And so that means that in Ohio's new budget, which is going to take effect at the end of September, driver education is going to be required up through age 20. And so that means that those 18, 19, and 20-year-olds are soon going to be required to take that driver training that in the past they might have skipped. And so it's something that, very few states do require this for up to that age, but we do anticipate it will save lives. And so if you're in a state that doesn't have driver training requirements at all, or doesn't require it for those riskiest drivers, really, I would encourage you to just prioritize that experience. Look for some sort of training. At the very least, use the resources out there and work on maximizing that time, that practice time that you're spending as a parent in the car with that teen, because that experience and that training is so essential.
Perfect. And so while you were talking, Kimberly, Pamela asked if we'd please share a printed list of the parent resources, and that will be in the email follow-up, so everyone will receive that. And then we also got a great comment from Jean that says, we can empower parents by educating them about GDL, graduated driver's licenses, driving restrictions. They can then better enforce the law to keep their teens safe, because many don't know the restrictions or fines associated with it. And I'm definitely a testament to that as a parent of a not even new driver. I admitted to Kimberly, Chris, and Pat, and Rick, I do not know the rules. So maybe one of you all could speak to that just a little bit about how parents can better educate themselves and therefore be a better educator of their kids. Pat, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rick. I saw you come off first.
Yeah, I'll very quickly. I think Kristen gave a great resource. IIHS's GDL information is always up to date. I know, and we'll make sure to include this in our follow-up too. Organizations like Impact Teen Drivers have their GDL Made Simple videos and programs are available in most states. So if you're trying to figure out what those rules are and those regulations, those are both great resources. I would say too that particularly, our Gen Zs are really what I like to call a why generation. They want to understand the why behind some of these laws. And once they understand that why, they're far more likely to comply. So I would encourage parents to have the conversation, not just about what the law is and because I said so, but dig a little bit deeper and say, hey, did you understand that for every teen you add to this vehicle, you're increasing the likelihood of being in a crash by nearly 200%? Understanding the dangers of driving at night, distractions, impairment, having those conversations, not just once, but on an ongoing basis, really does make a big difference in helping teens understand the why behind us trying to keep them safe. Pat, go ahead.
And I was going to say, I know both Rick and I serve with the Washington Regional Alcohol Program, and there's myriad resources out there for parents with different statistics and talking points and how to talk to kids. I was at Prince William County, actually just posted something today online I was reading before I came on, that said, listen to your kids' questions, don't be angry when they do something, and just common sense things like that. So there's tons of resources out there. But I understand as a parent, it's tough to, when the rubber meets the road and that kid's finally out there driving, that's when things really get tough. And, it was easy for me as a cop, as I say, till the kids were driving age and drinking, potentially between that, especially 16 to 21. Those are scary times for parents, but that's when you really have to, listen to them and kind of even talking with their friends and getting a good feel for what's happening in their lives and what their concerns are as well.
Right. And I will actually stick with you, Pat, because you've talked a little bit about all these conversations and what the conversations between parents and kids could look like. We often say that when kids make one bad decision, they're going to make another one. It's kind of like that next bad thing. So what could some of those conversations look like? When should they start? And how can they continue?
And once again, as I said earlier, it starts as a parent with modeling good behavior. And, even being in a place like DC, it's easy to, road rage is pervasive. So, the kids see everything that you do, but having conversations even before they're driving in cars about different expectations and how to handle, different scenarios as they'll come out to play later on in their lives. But I think once again, it's always been nice for me to have, sadly, one of the things that I saw that I could tell my kids about as a crash investigator, I've seen young people killed in crashes. And I think even harder than seeing young people killed in crashes was notifying family members of somebody that was killed in a crash that was absolutely, as we always say, 100% preventable. So, just repeating similar messages on a consistent basis, habits is something that they're going to do, whether it's seatbelts or understanding, I'll never get into the car with a drunk driver. I won't drink and drive. And once again, with so many options and Ubers and Lyfts and public transportations, there's so many other options that kids have nowadays that I think a lot of young people, and I'm very fortunate to get through those years with the kids making good choices and letting the kids know that, hey, you know what? I know a lot of kids are doing this, but I'm really proud of you, and acknowledging, their achievements when they're doing good things, not just when bad things happen, saying, hey, I'm disappointed in you or disappointed in your friends when things go wrong.
Yep, I really like that. Celebrate when they make a good decision. And so a question came in about some guidelines for when friends are driving your teen. So what are maybe some conversations that parents can have? And I guess that also goes for if your teen is going to drive around their friends. So maybe, Kristen, we haven't heard from you in a second, if you don't mind giving that one a go.
I would go back to the contract talk that I had. That doesn't necessarily just have to apply to your teen as a driver. You can also lay out your thoughts on who they're allowed to drive with. You can have specific rules about that you have to meet the driver, you have to meet their family. Again, going back to making sure they understand the laws. If they're going to pile in with a bunch of their friends, then they're breaking the law, and that's unacceptable. So just making sure that they understand what that looks like. And speaking up as a passenger is really hard. Even as an adult, we all have trouble with that. And so maybe encouraging them to speak up and maybe even role playing a little bit about what that could look like, so that when it does happen, they're not just like blindsided and having a hard time figuring out how they should address it. So maybe even doing a little bit of that role playing with them at home and saying, okay, they're using their phone and you feel super uncomfortable, or they're speeding, or not everybody in the car is buckled up, or, and then what do you say? How can you address that in a way that you feel comfortable? Being a passenger and speaking up is so important, and it's so difficult. So just giving them some tips and helping them figure that out beforehand.
That's a great point. And it actually takes me to the question that I have for Rick that was next, which is about exactly that. So we've already talked about what some of those conversations should look like at home. But Rick, maybe you can give us some pointers about when should we start having conversations? I know when it comes to underage drinking, we talk about starting conversations really, really early. Make the correct decision versus making the wrong decision, and graduate that as your kids get older. So what can that look like in terms of driving? And also, how can we empower kids to be brave and to
Yeah.
stop that friend from either driving impaired or drunk, or physically removing ourselves from a situation that is dangerous?
Yeah, Aaron, I think those same guiding principles that you talk about with the conversation around alcohol certainly apply to driving as well. I encourage parents to start having those conversations the minute that car seat turns around, because the minute that car seat turns around, you have a set of eyes that are now watching everything that you do and are establishing that expectation of what's acceptable behind the wheel. Like so many of my colleagues already talked about today, perceptions around speeding, and hey, it's okay to go 5 or 10 miles over the speed limit. Those habits start early. What we think about distractions, even when you're trying to reach to adjust the stereo or what's acceptable. Teens notice too when you go to the bar, you have a few drinks. They understand at an early age what those behaviors are. And so the minute the car seat turns around, I like to joke, is when that conversation can start. How to have that conversation, again, I've said this before, it's not just a one and done kind of moment. As Kristen said, the role playing element is so important. I would take it a step further and say, make a plan. Perhaps, having a conversation with your teen about, hey, if you're ever in a situation where you feel uncomfortable, text me this message. And that will give me the idea to call you and make me as the parent, make me the bad guy. Say, hey, you got to come home right now. I need to come pick you up. We have a family emergency. Other situations where I've talked to teens for years about saying, hey, I need to use the restroom. I need to use the restroom right now. I've never seen a car that wouldn't stop when someone says they have to go to the bathroom or they're going to throw up or things like that. So thinking about tactical conversations and real life examples that can get a teen out of that situation, even as Pat was saying, even if there are poor choices that have already been made, let's not focus on those, because as a parent, your top priority is to get the kid out of that tough situation and get them to safety. We can deal with the consequences that we know will come later on.
Great. And you guys, I love these questions that are coming in. And this is actually more of a conversation piece coming in from one of our attendees that's offering a really great young adult book by Kristen Hanna. I'll put this in the chat once I'm done reading it, called Night Road. It addresses the topic about getting into the car with a friend, it appears, who has been drinking. This person says it's very well written, important to encourage young drivers to read this book as part of some kind of school assignment, or parents giving their children the book. So that's a really great recommendation, for sure. So thank you so much for giving that, and I will put that in the comments here in just a moment. So I know we are talking a lot about modeling responsible behaviors, and Kristen, I know we had talked about this in particular when we kind of asked, what do we want to talk about during this? And yours was definitely modeling. So we know, and you mentioned this too, that when it comes to underage drinking, parents are the number one influence on their kids' decisions to drink or not drink. And so we emphasize not only the conversations, but the modeling. So can you speak a little bit more about like what Rick was talking about, like these little eyes watching us, and they continue to watch us?
Yeah, first of all, I mean, maybe some parents do, but I don't think every parent understands what a huge influence they are on their teens driving. And as Rick mentioned, they're starting to watch as soon as they can see you. And we actually did, with the National Distracted Driving Coalition recently, we did a survey of thousands of teens across the country. And we were surprised when we were talking about driving behaviors in general, that almost 60% of them said it was the parents that were their number one influence, not their friends. And I think that's where we have to make sure that we are not missing the boat there. You have to set the standard. You are the one that they are looking to, whether they realize it or not, because you're the one driving them around the most. You are an influence with your consistency. So you can't just decide to pick up the phone or have a few drinks one day and then talk about it with your teen about not doing it the next day. We all know that makes you not as credible. So making sure you're consistent, making sure you're building long-term habits. So if you're starting, even if you don't have a teen right now and you have younger kids, you start now, they're going to see, and that's going to be what their point is. So if they see that every time you start a car, everybody has to be buckled up, you're asking, are you buckled? Are you ready? Are you buckled? Then guess what? When they get behind, that's just going to be what's in their head. That's just how it goes. I remember when I was little, my parents checking their mirrors, you know what I mean? And now even at this day and age, I still do that. I still check my mirrors, and nobody said that to me. I just saw them doing it. And so just remember that they are seeing you. And everything that you are doing, speeding, distraction, playing with your Bluetooth to try and get it to work while you're driving, playing with your GPS. I mean, all of those things, if you do it, then they are going to see it as something that is an acceptable thing to do. So just really making sure that you're doing the best to model the behavior you want. And I'm so proud of the parents that are on this call right now, because you're already ahead of the pack, because you are here, you care enough to spend the time to learn and hear some tips. And so you're already doing great. So great job.
Agreed. All right. So again, with the attendee comments, I love this. And so Kimberly, I might direct this one to you. This person says great content and guidance. So of course, thank you so much. Thoughts on disciplinary actions and discussions for teens who have made bad decisions and not following the guidelines? It's more like a parenting question, right?
Yeah, well, I like what's been said about the, celebrating the good decisions too. And then, about having that contract so that there's kind of a clear, consequence. Like, ahead of time what the consequence is going to be if you make these bad decisions. And then also, making sure that you as a parent are staying on top of, your teens. You are monitoring, right? So you're using those apps. You know that, hey, I saw you were speeding. I saw that you were using your cell phone. And following through on those consequences. I mean, this is a really serious issue. And again, I think that people think that it won't happen to them, and especially, those teens and young adults, that think that they're invincible. But the more that you show that this is a serious issue and you're serious about this, the more that hopefully, that your teens will take it seriously as well.
Definitely. And Kathy says, I think you have your teens help you determine the consequences when you have them sign that contract. That's a really great recommendation. When they make the rules, they maybe would be less inclined to break the rules.
I love that idea of getting their input, because it's really, it has to be what matters to them, right? So we can't really give tips on that, because, somebody might like video games, somebody might like, having pizza nights. You can easily take the phone away. You can easily take the car keys away. I mean, there are all things that you can do, but I think it is going to have to be tailored to every teen, what those consequences look like. And you as a parent should know what would matter and what would make enough of a difference to, deter them from doing those risky behaviors.
100%, and realistic consequences too, that you'll actually follow through with, I think, for sure. Someone did ask, do you think Life 360 is a good tool? Kristen, I know that one was on your list because that was the top of it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably the most common one, and not even just for drivers, just parents in general use that to, keep track of their kids. So I don't want to recommend any specific ones, because, we're not endorsing products here, but I mean, I think that one's very popular. And I think when you look at the list of resources that I give, I kind of say underneath some tools that what they offer. So I think you can look at that list and see what they offer and decide if that's the right fit for you. And you can always test out a few of them. Some of them cost money, some of them are free. In that list, it says a lot of insurance companies offer those apps, and then you get discounts if the driver is doing a good job. So if you're getting a discount on your insurance, maybe you can incentivize your teen that money is in their pocket. If you're saving $25 a month because your teen's a good driver, then maybe they can have that money in their pocket. Maybe that's a good incentive for them to drive well, if they'll download that, if you'll let them download that app.
Perfect. I actually love that this comment and question came in from Michelle, because I was gonna zing you guys with it if no one was asking questions, but we are seeing a lot of people waiting until they're older to get their driver's licenses. So this has something to do with that. Michelle asks, in Michigan, driver's ed is not in schools. It's expensive. So I think we're seeing a trend of teens waiting until they're 18 in order to skip it and just take the test. So they miss the graduated licensing process and progressive supervised experience. Do you all have any comments about the fact that kids are waiting? I had actually never thought about that maybe being a reason for it, but kids are waiting longer to get their driver's licenses. Kimberly?
Yeah, I can take this. And that is something that we've been seeing, but not maybe as much as you might think. I know we looked at the data, and we estimate maybe about 30% of people in Ohio at least are waiting until they're 18. But that's still a big chunk of people. But we still do see a lot of people that are getting their license when they turn 16. And I know that AAA did a study on this a few years ago and found that, yes, people are waiting. But again, not everybody. And it is important to get that education. And so people wait for a variety of reasons, right? So it's the cost of driver trainings, but the cost of being a licensed driver. Maybe they're not ready. Maybe they don't really need to drive. They have other ways to communicate with their friends. So I think that this has been a trend that we've been seeing. And it is important, like I said, that even if you wait till you're 18 or, whatever your state requires for when you don't have to take driver training, that doesn't mean that magically you're going to all of a sudden be a good driver without any practice, right? It's still a complex skill. It's still a dangerous skill that you're going to be out on the roadways doing. And so you still really need that practice. So I would say, even if somebody waits until they no longer have to get driver training, that practice is still essential. Right. So some way making sure that work in those skills, find driver training. I guess just because the law says this is the way the process is, doesn't mean that that's the best practice, doesn't mean that that's the safest way to go. So, always look out for yourself and make sure that, you're doing what you can to protect yourself and your family.
Hey, Aaron, can I add to that?
Yes.
I think it's also important for parents to remember that in most states and territories, that when you go to the DMV, the BMV, whatever you want to call it, to sign for that license, you are responsible for that license, and for the behavior that your teen exudes on the roadways. So I've also encouraged parents, just as Kimberly was saying, to not feel the pressure that just because you've reached a magic date that our state legislatures and some research has decided, that doesn't necessarily mean your teen is ready to drive. There's a maturity factor that plays into this as well. And so it's okay in saying, hey, you know what, let's wait a little bit longer. That frontal cortex doesn't develop until the age of 25. And so brain development and maturity varies greatly person to person. And so I think that's a really important factor. And for those folks who do wait, the resources that we've talked about already, as well as one of my favorite, the National Road Safety Foundation's Passport to Safe Driving, and I'll make sure I include this in our follow-up too. They have a great resource that includes both tips for teens and for novice drivers and parents, as well as a podcast that goes with it to understand, again, how do you master some of those skills that are oftentimes missed, even the best of driver's ed courses. So there's ways to focus. There's ways you can order a free copy of that passport, and you can literally take the pages out and work on one skill at a time. Another great way to, again, fine tune those skills even without driving.
Awesome. So I'm going to read one more comment. We have one more question, and then we'll wrap everything up. Please do go ahead and put questions in the chat box or in the Q&A box if you all want to. This is an example of a parent being brave, and I think we talked about that before. If we're going to ask our kids to be brave, we need to be brave ourselves. So this parent said, I use Life 360 and like it a lot. I can even monitor other parents driving. Who knew? One friend's parent was driving 25 over the speed limit on the highway. My teen is no longer allowed to drive with that parent. So good on you. Make the rules and stick to the rules. So I love that. The last question is, Connecticut Department of Transportation is considering sponsoring a Teen Safe Driving Summit in 2026. Have other states sponsored a similar event? And if so, did they share best practices, or are y'all familiar with events like that?
Mm-hmm.
Rick, I see you nodding your head, so I'll let you go for it.
Yeah, absolutely. So to our friends in Connecticut, first, I'd say absolutely. It's a great opportunity to get together. Peer-to-peer based education is always the most effective way to get young people excited. As government agencies, even though we're really good at talking to the public, when we're talking to teens, having them be the advocates for themselves and their friend groups are so important. Lots of great organizations out there are doing this work. Impacting Drivers, FCCLA, SAD, all have youth summits at the state level. So I would encourage you not to reinvent the wheel. There are lots of great youth organizations that are doing that work and can share their agendas, their practices, their programs, all of that great work already that's in motion. You can visit any of those organizations' websites, contact their leadership, and get plugged in, and probably find some ways to work smarter, not harder, as well.
Perfect. Okay, so I do have a couple pieces of information coming here. It says AAA Northeast is hosting a teen summit in Connecticut in October. This is a great bunch of attendees. In New York, AAA Northeast, we have planned teen summits with advocates and community involvement with our teen drivers, and in Utica, New York. So thank you guys so much for sharing all this information. I see another one from Kristen. Virginia has, you'll have to tell me what Why?
It's YOVASO, which is Youth of
Okay.
Virginia Speak Up, and they're through the state police here. And they have a summer retreat that they're starting tomorrow. It's amazing. They do it at a local college, and they have like 200 teens come from high schools all over the state. So I'm happy to connect that person with the YOVASO program, or you can just look them up and get some ideas on. They've been doing it for years, and they really do a great job.
Great, thank you. And then I'll also add into our recap email, Kimberly has shared with me the study from AAA that shows that nationally about 60% of teens got their license before age 18. So we'll be able to share a link to that. So you all, we are past time. I will give everyone one last word, maybe one last thing that you have to share to encourage safe driving and encourage parents to keep their kids safe behind the wheel. I'll start with you, Pat.
Thanks again, and thanks everybody for attending today. I think, something common for all of us parents is when your child is born, you automatically know the meaning of unconditional love. And, even past these teenage years, you're going to love your kids their whole life. So you kind of cruise along easy. And then once you hit 16, that bump goes way up statistically of your likelihood for your child to be injured because they're in cars now with other teens or in driving scenarios. That never goes away. I just had a talk with my 23-year-old daughter and all of her friends that were taking a road trip about, keeping each other awake, not
Oh, Pat, I seem to have lost your connection.
a
Oh,
message.
there you go. Okay, Pat, Rick, I'm going to move to you while we get Pat back on the line.
Sure.
Is
Practice.
throughout. I'm going to get back to you and let you know that they're grateful for all of. Oh, sorry, Rick. I think I
Perfect,
I
you're
lost
great.
a little bit of net bandwidth. Okay, great, thank you.
Yes,
I
but
lost you
thank
guys,
you.
but I guess you didn't lose me.
Okay. Rick, go ahead.
Yeah, practice. Make sure that you are working with your team to find that art and science of driving. You're not just doing it until you hand them the keys, though. Driving can be this rite of passage and this opportunity. With great responsibility comes, or with great power comes great responsibility, right? You're now driving a 2,000-pound metal beast. Make sure that you check in with them, continue practicing with them all the way through their teen years and beyond. It's a great opportunity to keep them safe and give you some peace of mind as well.
Absolutely. Kristen.
Agreed. Just you all are doing a great job. You're on the first step by being here, and just continue the conversation. It doesn't end when they get their car keys. It has to continue way past that.
Perfect. And Kimberly?
Yeah, and in line with what everybody's been saying. I mean, you've been driving your kids around for 15, 16 years. What's a few more months of experience just to make sure that they're ready. It boggles my mind when parents try to rush them through this and don't really understand just how dangerous this is and how serious it is, and that you want your team to be ready. So experience is key, practice, communication. Just really make sure that they're ready before you hand them the keys. There's no rush. Like Pat said, it's something that's not going to go away. This risk that we're putting them in, they're going to be in these cars with friends and by themselves the rest of their lives. So why do we need to rush it?
Great. Well, thank you all. Thank you very much. And thank you to all of our attendees. I've never seen such an active Q&A box with such great words of wisdom and great questions too. So I very much appreciate everyone's attendance. It's an important topic, and it affects each of us on the roads, whether we are parents or not, whether our kids are driving or not. So like I said, we all share the roads. We all share the responsibilities. Like Rick said, with this power comes great responsibility. I feel like Spider-Man also said that, Rick.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll cite it to Spider-Man. Yeah, absolutely.
Perfect. So responsibility does start with each of us, and these conversations last a lifetime. Like I said earlier, we'll follow up the webinar with a link to the recording, all of these resources we mentioned, and we'll share some topics and highlights over social media over the coming days. Thanks again for everything that all of you do to keep kids safe and model responsible behaviors. Together, we will make sure they all get there responsibly. Thank you all very much.